Most men discover their wife is cheating through lipstick on a collar or a suspicious text message. I discovered mine through a legal document that arrived on a Thursday afternoon while I was grading papers in my home office. The envelope was thick and official, sent from Morrison and Associates, a law firm I had never heard of. Inside were divorce papers and a custody proposal so one-sided it would have been funny if it had not been about my two daughters. My name is Michael Chen. I am 47 years old. I teach high school history in Portland, Oregon. I drive a 2012 Honda Accord. I live in a modest three-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood. And until 6 weeks ago I believed my wife Jennifer loved me for exactly who I appeared to be. If you have ever watched someone underestimate you completely, subscribe. This story is going to show you exactly what that looks like when it falls apart. Let me tell you about the life I chose. I grew up in Seattle. My father immigrated from Taiwan in the 1970s and built a small technology components company from nothing. By the time I was in college, that small company had become something considerably larger. When my father passed away 12 years ago, he left me everything. The company was worth approximately $340 million. I was 35 years old and suddenly one of the wealthiest men in the Pacific Northwest that almost nobody had ever heard of. I made a decision that day that would define the next decade of my life. I did not want to be known for money. I did not want relationships built on wealth or status or expectation. I wanted something real. So I placed everything into an ironclad trust managed by a firm in San Francisco. I took a modest salary, enough to live comfortably but not extravagantly. I kept my father's name off everything public. I became a high school teacher because I had always loved history, and I built a life that looked exactly like what it was: simple, honest, and deliberate. I met Jennifer 3 years after my father died. She was a dental hygienist. She had a laugh that sounded like wind chimes, and she loved old movies and Sunday morning farmers markets. We dated for 2 years. I never told her about the trust or the company or the $340 million sitting in carefully managed accounts. I told myself I was protecting something pure. I told myself I was being careful. I told myself a lot of things that turned out to be true in ways I had not anticipated. We married in a small ceremony at a vineyard in Willamette Valley. 50 guests, handwritten vows, a reception that ended with dancing under string lights. Jennifer wore a dress she had found at a consignment shop, and she cried during our first dance, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. We bought the house in Portland 6 months later, 3 bedrooms, aging roof, a backyard with a garden. Jennifer said she would start but never did. We had 2 daughters, Emma and Sophie, now 9 and 7. I coached their soccer teams. Jennifer worked part-time at a dental office downtown. We lived on my teaching salary and her income. We budgeted carefully. We drove used cars. We took vacations to the Oregon coast instead of Europe. For 9 years it was exactly the life I had chosen. Quiet, real, grounded. Then Jennifer started working late on Thursdays. She had joined a book club, she said. A group of women from the dental office getting together to discuss novels and drink wine. I encouraged it. I thought it was good for her to have something outside of our family routines. I made dinner for the girls on Thursdays and helped with homework and never once questioned why she came home smelling faintly of cologne that was definitely not wine. The envelope arrived on a Thursday. The girls were at school. I had a free period and had come home to prep for an afternoon lecture on the Civil War. I opened the envelope standing in my kitchen and read the first page twice because my brain could not process what my eyes were seeing. Jennifer Chen was filing for divorce. She was seeking primary custody of both daughters. She was requesting half of all marital assets, the house, and monthly spousal support. The paper cited irreconcilable differences and emotional distance. They were signed by her and notarized 3 days earlier. I sat down at the kitchen table and read through all 27 pages. The asset list was thorough. Our joint checking account, our modest savings, the house valued at its current market rate, my teacher's pension, my 2012 Honda, everything we owned together divided precisely down the middle. It was reasonable, legally sound, and based on a complete misunderstanding of reality. There was a note paperclip up to the back page, handwritten in Jennifer's looping script. It said she was sorry. It said she had tried to make it work. It said she hoped we could be civil for the sake of the girls. It said her attorney would be in touch to schedule mediation. Her attorney was someone named Brian Morrison from Morrison and Associates. Sigh, it's the same name on the letterhead. I did not call Jennifer. I did not rage or break anything or drive to her dental office. I sat at my kitchen table for approximately 45 minutes, completely still, thinking about 9 years of Thursday book clubs. Then I called my attorney, not a divorce attorney, my trust attorney, a man named Robert Hang, who worked for the firm in San Francisco that had managed my father's estate for the past 12 years. I told Robert I was being divorced. I told him Jennifer had no idea about the trust or the company or any of it. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked me one question. Did I want to continue protecting that information, or did I want to proceed with full disclosure? I thought about Emma and Sophie. I thought about 9 years of a life I had built deliberately. I thought about Thursday evenings in cologne that was not wine. I told Robert I wanted to wait. I wanted to see exactly how this would unfold. I wanted to understand what I was really dealing with before I made any decisions about what to reveal. Robert said he understood. He said he would prepare documentation but would not file anything until I gave him explicit instructions. I thanked him and hung up. Jennifer came home that evening at her normal time. She walked into the kitchen where I was making pasta with the girls, and she looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was not guilt exactly. It was more like resolve. She asked if we could talk after the girls went to bed. I said, of course. We ate dinner like we had eaten 1,000 dinners before. Emma talked about her science project. Sophie complained about a boy in her class who kept stealing her pencils. Jennifer passed the salad and refilled water glasses and played the part of a mother at a family dinner with the kind of performance that only comes from practice. After the girls were asleep, Jennifer sat across from me at the kitchen table. She said she knew I had received the papers. She said she was sorry for the way I had found out, but she had not known how else to do it. She said we had grown apart. She said she still cared about me, but she was not in love with me anymore. She said she hoped we could make this as easy as possible for everyone, especially the girls. She said her attorney had recommended mediation, and she thought that was the right approach. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I asked her one question: was there someone else? She hesitated for just a fraction of a second, then she said no. She said this was about us, about our relationship, about needing something different in her life. She said it with conviction, with practiced sincerity. She was lying and we both knew it, and she did not care that I knew. I told her I would agree to mediation. I told her I wanted what was best for the girls. I told her we could work through this like adults. She looked relieved. She actually looked relieved. She said she was glad I was being reasonable. She said Brian had told her that these things could get ugly, but she had known I would not be that kind of person. Brian, her attorney, the man whose cologne she had been wearing home every Thursday for God knows how long. I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about reasonable, thinking about 9 years of deliberately choosing simplicity, thinking about a woman who had loved me for who she thought I was and was now leaving me for exactly the same reason. The next morning, I called my brother David. David Chen, corporate attorney in Seattle, the only person outside of Robert Hang who knew the full scope of what our father had left behind. I told him everything. The divorce papers, the asset list, the Thursday book clubs, the attorney named Brian Morrison. David was quiet for a long time, then he started laughing. Not cruel laughter, just the deep, exhausted laughter of a man who has just heard something so absurd it loops back around to being funny. He said Jennifer was about to have the worst day of her life, and she had no idea it was coming. He said I should let this play out exactly as she had planned it. He said I should go to mediation, be cooperative, be reasonable. He said I should let her think she understood exactly what she was dividing in half. Then at the precise right moment, I should let Robert Hang introduce himself. I followed David's advice. I agreed to mediation. I showed up to the first session at Morrison and Associates with a folder containing copies of all our joint financial documents. Jennifer was already there with Brian Morrison, who turned out to be exactly what I had expected: mid-40s, expensive suit, confident handshake, wedding ring conspicuously absent. He greeted me with professional courtesy and a slight condescension that suggested he had already decided I was going to be easy to manage. The mediation sessions happened over 3 weeks. We met twice. Brian did most of the talking. Jennifer's side. He was smooth, practiced, sympathetic. He talked about fair division and the girls' best interests in maintaining stability during a difficult transition. He proposed Jennifer keep the house since the girls were settled there. He suggested I take the car and half the savings. He calculated spousal support based on my teaching salary. Everything was reasonable, equitable, designed to look generous while giving Jennifer exactly what she wanted. I agreed to almost everything. I asked for more time with the girls, equal custody instead of primary. Brian and Jennifer consulted quietly and agreed. I asked to keep my teacher's pension intact. Brian said that was fair. I was cooperative, reasonable, exactly the kind of person Brian had told Jennifer I would be. I watched them exchange glances across the table, small moments of satisfaction. They thought this was going exactly as planned. During the second mediation session, Brian presented the final settlement agreement. It was clean, thorough, ready for signatures. Everything divided, everything accounted for based on assets totaling approximately $425,000. The house, the cars, the accounts, the pension. A comfortable middle-class life split precisely down the middle. Jennifer would get roughly $285,000 in total value including the house. I would get the remainder. We would share custody. She would receive modest spousal support for 3 years. Brian slid the document across the table with a pen. He said once we both signed, we could file with the court and complete this process efficiently. He said he thought we had reached a fair agreement. Jennifer nodded. She looked at me with something that might have been pity or might have been relief. She was ready to move forward with her life with Brian with whatever she thought she was gaining by leaving. I picked up the pen, then I set it down. I said I appreciated Brian's work, but I needed to make sure we had accounted for everything. I said I wanted to be thorough. I said I had asked my attorney to review the settlement just to make sure we had not missed anything important. Brian's expression shifted slightly. He asked if I had retained counsel. I said I had, just someone to look over the paperwork, nothing adversarial. Brian said that was fine but unnecessary. He said everything was straightforward. I agreed. I said I just wanted to be careful. I said my attorney would be in touch. Jennifer looked confused. She asked why I needed an attorney if we had already agreed to everything. I told her I just wanted to make sure the girls were protected. She accepted that. Brian accepted that. They had no reason not to. Robert Hang called Brian Morrison's office the next day. He introduced himself as my legal counsel. He said he had reviewed the proposed settlement. He said there appeared to be some assets that had not been included in the division. Brian, according to Robert, had been polite but dismissive. He had said all marital assets had been accounted for. Robert had said he did not think that was accurate. He had said he would be sending over additional documentation. The documentation arrived at Morrison and Associates 2 days later. 147 pages of trust documents, corporate filings, asset valuations, and financial statements. The trust my father had established. The company that had been quietly generating returns for 12 years. The accounts that had grown from $340 million to just over $800 million through careful management and market growth. Everything I had never told Jennifer about, everything she had never asked about, everything she had assumed did not exist because I drove a 2012 Honda and taught high school history. Robert called me that afternoon. He said Brian Morrison had called him 3 times. He said Jennifer had called Brian approximately 7 times. He said there was going to be an emergency meeting and I should probably prepare myself. The meeting happened 2 days later. Same conference room, different energy. Jennifer looked like she had not slept. Brian looked like a man who had just realized he had drastically miscalculated. They sat across from me and Robert, and the air in the room was so tense it felt like something physical. Brian started talking about full disclosure requirements, about marital assets and community property, about Jennifer's entitlement to half of everything accumulated during the marriage. Robert listened patiently. Then he started talking about premarital trusts, about assets held separately, about careful legal structures designed specifically to remain outside of marital property, about my father's estate and the decisions I had made 12 years ago, about the fact that the trust had been established before I had ever met Jennifer, about the fact that not $1 of trust money had ever entered our joint accounts or been used for marital expenses. Brian tried to argue. He talked about commingling and lifestyle and implied contributions. Robert dismantled every argument. With the kind of precision that comes from 30 years of estate law. The trust was airtight. The separation was absolute. Jennifer had no legal claim to any of it. What she was entitled to was exactly what had been outlined in the original settlement. The house, the car, the joint accounts, the life we had built on my teaching salary, the modest middle-class existence she had thought she was leaving. Jennifer did not say anything for a long time. Then she asked me why I had never told her. Her voice was quiet, shocked. I looked at her across the table. I said I had wanted to build something real, something that was not about money or status, something based on who we actually were. I said I had thought that was what we had. She stared at me like I was a stranger, like 9 years had evaporated and she was seeing me for the first time. Brian tried to recover. He talked about negotiation and reasonable settlements. He suggested that even if the trust was separate, there were other considerations. The girls, the lifestyle they had become accustomed to, Jennifer's contributions to the household. Robert said I was happy to discuss child support. He said I wanted the girls to have everything they needed. He said I was prepared to be generous with their education, their activities, their future. He said Jennifer's claim to anything beyond that was non-existent. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Jennifer got the house and half the joint accounts exactly as originally proposed. I got equal custody of the girls. I set up education trusts for Emma and Sophie that would cover private school, college, graduate school, whatever they needed. I paid Jennifer's legal fees because Robert said it was the decent thing to do. I did not pay spousal support because her attorney had tried to claim half of $800 million, and the court had not been sympathetic. Jennifer moved Brian Morrison into the house 6 weeks after the divorce was final. I heard about it from Emma, who mentioned it casually during a weekend visit. I did not react. I asked if she liked Brian. She said he was okay, but he talked about himself a lot. I told her that was honest of her. Sophie said Brian did not know how to make pancakes the right way like I did. I told her I would make pancakes every weekend they stayed with me. I still teach high school history. I still drive the 2012 Honda. I still live in a modest apartment in the same neighborhood. The girls stay with me every other week and we have dinner together and do homework and watch movies. I have not changed my life. I have not bought anything extravagant or moved into a mansion or done any of the things Jennifer probably imagined I would do once the divorce was over. I chose this life deliberately and I'm still choosing it. Jennifer calls sometimes, not often. Usually about logistics with the girls. Her voice is different now, careful. There is a distance in it that was not there before. She is living with a man who makes $200,000 a year as a divorce attorney, and she is learning what it feels like to have chosen poorly. I am not cruel about it. I am polite, cooperative, focused on the girls. I do not mention the trust or the company or the $800 million she did not know existed. I do not need to. Brian Morrison still practices law in Portland. I looked him up once out of curiosity. He specializes in high-asset divorces. I almost laughed. The irony was too perfect. The man who had tried to divide my modest teaching life in half had missed the largest asset division of his career, because he had assumed I was exactly what I appeared to be. He had been confident, dismissive, certain he understood the scope of what he was dealing with. He had been wrong in a way that probably still keeps him up at night. At 47 years old, I have learned something about underestimation. It is the most powerful weapon a person can have because nobody sees it coming. Jennifer looked at me for 9 years and saw a high school teacher with a used car and a modest house. She never once asked if there was anything else. She never wondered why I was so content with so little. She never questioned the deliberate simplicity of the life I had built. She just assumed she understood everything there was to know. I chose to live modestly. I chose to teach instead of manage. I chose to drive a Honda instead of a Mercedes. I made those choices carefully and with purpose. Jennifer thought those choices made me small. She thought they made me manageable. She thought they made me easy to leave. She had no idea those choices were the only thing between her and a life she could have shared if she had just asked the right questions. She spent 9 years married to one of the wealthiest men in Oregon, and she left him for a divorce attorney who makes a fraction of what I donate to charity every year. She walked away from $800 million because she thought she was walking away from $400,000. She underestimated me so completely that she destroyed her own future while trying to secure it. I do not feel victorious about it. I feel something quieter. I feel like a man who built something real and watched it collapse and realized the foundation had never been as solid as he had believed. I feel like a father who is raising his daughters to ask questions and value substance over appearance. I feel like a teacher who has learned the most important lesson of all. People will always underestimate the quiet ones, the modest ones, the ones who choose simplicity over status. And when they realize their mistake, it will already be too late. Jennifer realized it in a conference room with 147 pages of trust documents spread across the table. Brian Morrison realized it when his confident settlement offer became worthless. They both learned the same thing at the same time. The man they thought they understood completely was someone they had never really known at all. I still make pancakes for Sophie every other weekend. I still help Emma with her history homework. I still grade papers at my kitchen table and drive my students to debate tournaments in a car that is older than most of them. I am still exactly who I have always been. The only difference is now everyone knows there was always more to the story. They just never bothered to ask. If you enjoyed this, subscribe and hit that like button. You are part of a community that values real stories about real consequences. Thank you for being here.